how does the Fourth Amendment apply to evacuation shelters? All right, guys, my name is Anthony Bandiero, bringing you the Roadside Chat. I really appreciate all the support that you've given us here at Blue to Gold and the feedback about this. You know, we're trying to grow this channel. I want more people to see it, so if you want to support the channel, the best way is just to share these videos with your fellow officers and ask them to subscribe. When you subscribe, it tells me that you see value in these, right? That you want to be notified and so forth and see these in your feed. All right, so let's go through this. This question does come from an officer in Florida. That kind of makes sense, right? So look, after a hurricane or other natural disaster, hundreds of people are displaced temporarily and they're set up to live temporarily in a gymnasium, in a local school, an abandoned building that's converted to temporary housing. And so, look, you can imagine this, right? You have the gymnasium full of people sleeping and so forth. Now, officers are generally assigned to provide safety and security to these shelters during this time. How would the Fourth Amendment apply to searching the belongings or their sleeping quarters? All right, that's all I got, right? So here's what we're going to do. Before we start kind of diving into some Q&A here, what case are we going to use to try to give us some guidance here, right? About whether or not we can search things that people bring into these evacuation shelters. Well, one case is a seminal case. It's called Katz versus United States. And this case establishes expectation of privacy, right? So here's what the Supreme Court said. In order to have a expectation of privacy, a reasonable expectation of privacy, there's a twofold requirement. First, that a person have exhibited an actual, subjective expectation of privacy. And second, that the expectation be one that society is prepared to recognize as reasonable. Thus, a man's home is, for most purposes, a place where he expects privacy. But objects, activities, or statements that he exposes to the plain view of outsiders are not protected because no intention to keep them to himself has been exhibited. On the other hand, conversations in the open would not be protected against being overheard, for the expectation of privacy under those circumstances would be unreasonable. So the society wouldn't recognize it as reasonable. Now let's talk about evacuation shelters. Now certainly there is some Fourth Amendment protections in these places, right? It's not like when these people walk in the gymnasium, the Constitution is left outside, right? They have rights that they take with them inside. Now, when it comes to searching bags, and when it comes to, hey, in order to come in here, we have to search your bags and so forth. Well, you're going to have to look at your state law and see what the law is on evacuation shelters. But as far as the Constitution is concerned, the best way to handle that is by consent, which is if you choose to stay here, you give us consent to make sure that you have no dangerous items that you bring in the facility. I can see that being litigated, but I also can see it being a valid government search, right? Under the administrative search doctrine, where you have a compelling reason to keep out these dangerous items from this evacuation shelter and so forth. That's another discussion about what factors those courts look at. But as the cop is walking around, let's say they're now in the shelter, as the cop is walking around and patrolling that area, and they see something in plain view, of course, they can take it. Now, can they keep searching the person's bags underneath their bed for more evidence? The answer generally is no. Here's why. If they keep stuff out of plain view, right, are they exhibiting a reasonable expectation of privacy? The answer is yes. They're keeping it hidden, right? And number two, is this something that society would expect as reasonable? And the answer is yes. So, you know, the society's not going to say, oh, if you're the victim of a hurricane and you have to sleep at a evacuation shelter, then the cops can just search your stuff if they have probable cause, right? That's not how that works. These people, this is their temporary domicile. Obviously, it's watered down as far as their rights. It's not a full-blown home. But they certainly have an expectation of privacy in their belongings. So in order to get into those belongings, what would you need? Well, their consent. If the suspect wants to give you consent, that's fine. or some type of exigency. If you think that there's a dangerous item in there and you don't have time to go get a warrant, right? Or you believe that by the time you go get you're working solo and there's a lot going on, right? And you believe that by the time you can't take all this stuff with you, or by the time you come back with a warrant, the evidence is going to be gone. That could be exigency. But if you don't have consent and you don't have a recognized exception based on some kind of exigency, then you're going to need a warrant. I guess you could also try to call it search instant to arrest if you have the right facts, but you're playing with fire. All right? So I hope that helps a little bit. I didn't really get any scenarios. I didn't get like any fact patterns about, hey, do you think it'd be okay under these circumstances? But based on that limited kind of question, that's my feedback, right? So there are some Fourth Amendment protections. Guys, I hope this has helped. Get it right every single time. All right? Stay safe. I'll see you next time.